especially with lines. There used to be such sticklers when we did Next Gen. You had to do it.
To many people, Jonathan Frakes is Commander Riker, the confident, charming Starfleet officer from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Yet off-screen, Frakes faced a personal tragedy when his younger brother Daniel was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1997, just 1 week before the birth of Jonathan's daughter. Unfortunately, Daniel passed away at age 41, and this shattered Frakes' world. Join us as we unveil how the pain shaped and led him to a mission far greater than any Starship Command, a rising star in Hollywood. Born on August 19, 1952 in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, Jonathan Scott Frakes grew up in an academic home. His father was a professor at Lehigh University. At the time, his mother was caring for his younger brother Daniel. While Frakes attended Liberty High School, he ran track and played the trombone in the school band. And a few years later, he entered Penn State in 1970 as a psychology major. However, everything changed in the summer of 1971. While he was working as an usher at the Festival of America Theater, Frakes was picked from the crowd for a chorus role in a production of Indians. After that moment, he was immediately smitten by acting and changed his major to pursue it. He later graduated in 1974 with a BFA in theater arts, then pushed deeper into Harvard's Loeb Drama Center, where he earned his MFA in 1976. This marked the beginning of his acting career. After Harvard, he went deep into New York's off-Broadway scene, where he then joined the Impossible Ragtime Theater and landed on Broadway in the musical Shenandoah. However, there was still a conflict in his mind, despite his classical training, as he often wondered if he should chase stage glory or Hollywood's spotlight. This dilemma drove him west. When he arrived in Los Angeles, he continued chasing his dream and hooked guest spots on Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island, The Waltons, Dukes of Hazzard, and more. Each of these roles created a doorway to greater success in the industry, and then in 1983 he appeared in NBC's soap Bare Essence, alongside Jeannie Francis. But his real breakout came shortly after, when he was cast as Stanley Hazard in ABC's North and South in 1986. This Civil War epic won him Emmy recognition, but also some criticism. However, all roads led back to more auditions, and then landed him an unknown role in a sci-fi show, Star Trek: The Next Generation. At first, he admitted that he was nervous to compete with star actors like Billy Campbell, but he held fast and received another callback, which landed him his role as Commander William T. Riker in 1987. That moment brought him not only national recognition, but also into the heart of a franchise with the highest level of devotion in television history. Nevertheless, even then, many wondered if this once uncertain theater student could embody a hero whom millions of people trusted him to lead. Fame and fandom. When Star Trek: The Next Generation premiered in September 1987, it didn't just launch a series. It took Jonathan Frakes from a working actor to a sci-fi icon. He became one of only 2 actors, besides the great Patrick Stewart, to appear in every episode of the series over 7 seasons, making him a household name. But his success didn't come without pressure. Some fans adored him, treating him like a living legend, while others resented the new show, calling for Kirk and Spock to be brought back to the series. However, this only fueled a deeper sense of responsibility in Frakes to become more than just a charming sidekick, but also the pillar of a new generation of Star Trek. With Patrick Stewart's wise, commanding Picard and Brent Spiner's earnest Data, Riker added heart and swagger to the series. Also, his romantic tension with Marina Sirtis's Deanna Troi resonated so strongly that he later called for their reunion despite creative resistance. And so, as his fame grew, did his curiosity. He was a star and could easily take in everything, from script meetings to shadowing guest directors and spending more than 300 hours in editing rooms. Frakes was molding his image as a living icon. While they were still shooting Season 3 of the series, he landed his first directing gig with The Offspring, and behind the cameras, he commanded a strong cast, which earned him praise for bringing cohesion despite the chaos. Still, the shift was not without some friction. He later reflected that his directorial ambitions were born out of a desire to escape typecasting. And so, as he directed multiple episodes in the series, his co-star, Patrick Stewart's trust in him also grew, 124 to 130. Eventually, Frakes ascended to feature film director with Star Trek in 1996. By the time TNG concluded in 1994, he had shaped not just the narrative of his character, but the creative voice of the franchise itself, directing 8 series episodes and 2 major films. Yet beneath the applause, tension lingered. This fueled more than frustration. it sparked a sense of purpose. Frakes wasn't just an actor riding a wave of fandom, he became a storyteller with the power to guide Star Trek's legacy. However, despite his creative authority, he still faced personal struggles in his life, finding love and building a life. In 1983, while on the set of Bare Essence, Jonathan met the 20-year-old soap star Jeannie Francis for the first time. She was famous for her role as Laura Spencer on General Hospital, 0 o'clock to 007. Their chemistry was subtle but noticeable. When the two met again 2 years later during North and South, which was released in 1985, this led to a romance that resulted in an engagement in 1986 and a marriage on May 28, 1988. Though celebrity marriages are rarely certain, theirs thrived on shared creativity and mutual grounding. Frakes praised Frances for her emotional depth, and she adored him for his sense of humor. By 1994, they had their first child, Jameson Ivor Frakes, born on the 20th of August. 3 years later, they had another child, Elizabeth Frances Frakes, in May 30, 1997. Years later, Jameson followed in his father's footsteps, taking on a career path behind the camera and pursuing a career in music and documentary studies. At the same time, Eliza showed early promise as a writer and director, even appearing as a cameo on General Hospital and earning praise for her online playwriting. At first glance, their family seemed flawless, and Jeannie stepped back from writing to embrace motherhood. "I think I wanted to be a good mother more than a great actress," she shared during an interview. Meanwhile, Jonathan was still trying to strike a balance between his rising Star Trek stardom and familial obligations. But beneath their seemingly perfect life lay the stress of handling high-profile careers. Still, their partnership remained solid. Frakes supported Heaney's side ventures, such as her Maine cottage store, The Cherished Home, and even assisted with business management when they briefly lived in Belfast, Maine. They also experimented in real estate, flipping homes in Woodland Hills and generating nearly $2 million in profit. Yet, despite the harmony between them, some doubts and cracks began to surface. Jeannie's attempt to transition into primetime and theater was unsuccessful, which pushed her to return to soaps and fueled insecurities about sacrificing her career for her family. Meanwhile, Frakes' own journey contended with the only Star Trek guy label. Were they building a genuine family legacy or living in the shadow of celebrity status? Despite these rising issues, the public only saw unity between them. Frakes later reflected on their 38-year love story, saying that he has still marveled that Jeannie took a chance on him when his career was less certain. Struggles with fame and pressure. Although Jonathan Frakes may have played the confident Commander Riker in Star Trek, he still wrestled with fame's double-edged sword off-screen. With 7 seasons of universal recognition came dwindling privacy and high expectations. He revealed in an interview that every autograph request, convention selfie, and fan antics were a reminder that his identity was no longer his own. He mentioned that he'd become so inseparable from Riker that casting directors balked at seeing him elsewhere, adding that he feared becoming only the Star Trek guy and had to forge another path for himself. This internal conflict fueled a turn behind the camera. He immersed himself in directing, learning new techniques from industry veterans, and shadowing directors before earning his chance behind the camera with TNG's Season 3 episode, The Offspring. He later reflected during an interview that directing felt like coming home, and that he was much happier directing than acting. His first debut as a director on Star Trek First Contact, which was released in 1996, was both triumphant and tumultuous. With his name attached to a $92 million grossing film, after reaching a franchise best of $30 million that weekend, he achieved vindication as a creator, not just a performer. Yet with this success came higher expectations. The next sequel, Insurrection, which was released in 1998, opened strong but finished with $117 million worldwide. Although this was a solid success, it was still overshadowed by First Contact and the definitions of success in Hollywood. Then came Thunderbirds, which was released in 2004, but the movie ended in public disappointment. Although he risked everything for that movie, its general success was low, which pushed him into what he called movie jail. "I went from 60 to 0 failure," he later said. And so they packed up, returned to Maine, and he watched his career slow down. He was left facing 2 opposing truths, and so while he loved directing, he hated losing the momentum he had earned. The career he carved behind the camera paid a personal toll on his identity as an actor and husband, but this prepared him for reinvention. He later returned to television in Roswell, Castle, NCIS, LA, Leverage, and more, embracing steady directing while staying close to his family. This brought him full circle to Star Trek, where he shared his directorial knowledge in the productions of Picard and Strange New Worlds. The tragic loss of his brother. Jonathan always described his younger brother Daniel as his best friend. He was his constant companion through childhood and early adulthood in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. But when Daniel got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1996 and given just 6 to 8 months to live, it shattered both their worlds. His doctors found the cancer only after Daniel showed signs of jaundice, but by then, it had already spread. Jonathan had dropped everything to be with him, leaving behind the bright lights of Star Trek sets and Hollywood glamour. He often shared that watching Daniel's health deteriorate was agonizing. Despite their attempt at chemotherapy, Daniel passed on at age 41, just a week before baby Elizabeth's birth, which left Jonathan numb with grief. The void Daniel's death left forced him to confront his mortality and made him question everything he held dear. The loss reshaped his life and made him lean more on his wife Jeannie and their 2 children as he realized how fragile time can be. Years after his brother had passed, Jonathan still talked about him with pain and regret. During an interview with People magazine, he shared that Daniel was his best friend and that he still thinks of him often, adding that confronting tragedy made him reevaluate his priorities. He said that he didn't see himself just as an actor or director anymore, but instead as a son, a brother in grief, and a man determined to preserve Daniel's memory. Jonathan refused to let Daniel's story end in silence. In 2022, he became a public advocate for the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, PanCan, raising awareness and funding. He also spoke nationwide as part of PanCan's November campaign, stressing that when Daniel was diagnosed, the 5-year survival rate was just 4%. However, it has increased to around 11% today, but it still lags far behind other cancers. He also joined forces with Star Trek alumni like Kitty Swink and Armin Shimerman to lead PanCan's Trek Against Pancreatic Cancer fundraising events, and collectively their efforts brings in tens of thousands annually, including purple-themed marches and celebrity appearances that honor the memory of lost loved ones while pushing critical research. He has often shared his motive and inspiration behind this ambition, saying that although he had already lost his brother Daniel, he wants to do whatever he can to make a difference for other families affected by pancreatic cancer. He admitted that grief never fully leaves, but being visible in the fight gives it meaning. For Jonathan, Daniel's death marked a turning point in his life and career. He no longer managed fame and creativity in isolation, but took on a new mission to save lives with his every step. Back in 1997, he'd lost his strongest ally, and in the years that followed, he'd built a legacy not just on screen, but off-screen in memory and action, turning pain into advocacy. In the wake of his brother Daniel's death, Jonathan Frakes retreated into a deep grief, and for years he felt untethered from himself and unable to immerse himself in projects the way he once could. His work began to feel hollow, and as a result, he started distancing himself from the public eye. Yet, amidst that emptiness, he found a new purpose when he discovered PanCan with a fellow Star Trek legend, Kitty Swink, who herself was a cancer survivor. By 2024, their fundraising team had exceeded $150,000 after they rallied Star Trek fans and organized Purple Stride events across the United States to support their cause. By doing this, he was able to turn his despair into courage and purpose. But he didn't stop there. He also embraced opportunities with Stand Up to Cancer, joining forces with other public figures during Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month, and spoke candidly on camera, recounting how his life had shifted after Daniel's death. Still, not every moment of advocacy felt triumphant, and by comparison, when he returned to Star Trek and Picard and later series, such as Strange New Worlds, his roles as director and actor took on new meaning. On set, he carried with him a quiet resolve, a reminder that his work wasn't just entertainment, but rather part of a greater mission. So what once threatened to break him became a catalyst for change, and by sharing his story openly, rallying support, and headlining research in pancreatic cancer, he gave voice to countless others who have lost to the disease. Jeannie's struggle with addiction. From the outside, Jeannie Francis was the epitome of soap opera glamour. At just 15 years old, she dazzled as Laura on General Hospital, But by the time she turned 19, her starry facade concealed a deep personal crisis. Having to work non-stop while continuing her education through on-set tutors created a crushing isolation in the life of the young star. There were no teenage friends, no school dances, just long hours on a tight soap set, and that sense of disconnection opened the ground for her addiction. By 1981, she was caught in a destructive spiral of cocaine and alcohol. She later described her first hit of coke as numbing the pain, and that although it had brought her a huge relief, she also feared the hold it had on her. Her turning point came during a 48-hour binge that ended with hospital treatment for exhaustion, a burned hand, and a sprained ankle. When she woke up, her producers were brutal in their words, reminding her that it didn't matter if she lived or died. This was just the push she needed to quit General Hospital and start choosing her recovery over fame, even though it meant giving up the role that had defined her. Her decision to quit left her fan base reeling. Some called it brave, others labeled it career suicide, but she didn't change her mind. "I knew I would never get clean and sober while still on General Hospital because there were drugs everywhere on set," she reflected. Jonathan, who was still navigating his career, became her rock. Behind closed doors, he supported her treatment, accompanied her to meetings, and shielded their relationship from the media. Though their fame painted their marriage as enviable, privately they endured fear and tension. After Jeannie departed from GH, she struggled to reclaim her career. Some casting directors dismissed her as just Laura, doubting that she could bring depth beyond the soap sphere. Through this turmoil, her relationship with Jonathan only deepened. Jonathan praised Jeannie's refusal to be defined by addiction, and Jeannie often credits their stability for helping her remain sober for decades. Together, they eventually returned to the spotlight as Jeannie took on new roles in All My Children and Days of Our Lives, while Jonathan stood behind and in front of the camera in Star Trek and beyond. However, their resilience wasn't without scars. Jeannie battled recurring weight and body image struggles, but she learned to guard her mental health fiercely, prioritizing peace over casting whispers. Fan communities rallied at conventions and on social media with support that transcended fandom. They shared positive and admirable comments, which were circulated alongside tribute posts highlighting their personal and professional journeys. Their gestures reflected a deeper truth to both of them, that most of the time, audiences ultimately cared about human resilience more than screen personas. Finding light again. After navigating grief, setbacks, and reinvention, Jonathan Frakes returned to Star Trek. This time it wasn't just in front of the camera, but masterfully behind it. In 2020's Star Trek Picard, he reprised Riker in a storyline that reunited him with Deanna Troi, creating a moment that hit fans like a tidal wave of nostalgia and emotion. He described working script by script with showrunner Michael Chabon to ensure that Riker felt authentic, blending pure collaboration with meticulous attention to character. Beyond acting, he chose to re-embrace directing, guiding multiple episodes for Picard and 3 in Discovery's 3rd season. Showrunner Michelle Paradise applauded his emotional feel for tone, praising how cast and crew members admired his collaborative spirit. Frakes' return behind the camera was less about reclaiming the game and more about belonging and trust. His fans welcomed his reappearance with gratitude and relief. After years of differing opinions from his audiences, who were torn between Discovery and Picard, and also Strange New Worlds, Frakes finally directed the landmark crossover by bringing animation characters from Lower Decks into live action alongside Spock and Captain Pike. The move was hailed by critics, who called it spectacular and the favorite Trek since Next Gen, crediting his feel for variety and tone. At the same time, Frakes began mentoring the new generation, offering assurance and on-set guidance. These moments revealed him not only as a legacy, but also as a leader who carried the torch of collaborative storytelling forward. Yet this revival carried heavy dualities. For years, he had the impression that Starship Command felt like the only place that welcomed him. Star Trek was both his career lifeline as an actor and a director. But when he returned in multiple roles, he changed that dynamic. He then recognized that Star Trek's expansive universe allowed freedom for creativity and also helped him build relationships across decades. But behind the renewed energy, a subconscious tension lingered. Frakes revealed that he often questioned whether he could remain dynamic within an iconic franchise without succumbing to nostalgia. He described Trek's current era as really healthy, highlighting Discovery's diversity, inclusion, and storytelling courage, and noted that Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds brought the spark back to the series. This was an opinion that many fans agreed with, and now, when Riker steps into view or Frakes calls action behind the camera, it feels like more than a comeback. When asked about this feeling, he explained that it now feels like home, that he isn't just returning to the franchise that defined him, but he's also shaping its future, nurturing new voices and expanding its emotional depth. What once seemed like a burden has become an anchor, and for Jonathan Frakes, Star Trek is no longer a trap, but a universe filled with vast possibilities, fatherhood, fears, and hope. After his brother Daniel passed away, Jonathan's understanding of fatherhood has not only changed but deepened. He reflected that time became his most precious commodity, but also his greatest fear. He shared during a podcast interview with The Art of Fatherhood that he was determined not to let grief estrange him from his children, and that moving a family to Hollywood taught him important life skills. However, beneath the surface, his emotions were still raw. He confessed in interviews that after Daniel's passing, the smallest moments, such as reading bedtime stories and helping his kids with their homework, were now some of the best times of his life. In one interview, he said, "You have to cling to the people you love and remember the people who love you." That vulnerability marked a new chapter in his emotional life. He was no longer just a commanding presence on screen, but also a man haunted by the fragility of family bonds. His children became anchors, and through them, he found echoes of both hope and loss as reminders that life continues, even when loved ones are gone. His fan communities also noticed the changes. Yet beneath the transformation, he admitted that he sometimes feared being emotionally overwhelmed. Therefore, the tension between being open and self-preservation became a constant problem he battled with. But it wasn't the only problem. It was also a source of emotional resilience. His vulnerability likely helped his children, Jameson and Elizabeth, navigate their grief with greater emotional tools. In a 2023 interview, Frakes noted that parenting forces you to face your mortality. He said, "You realize your own life is being lived through these children now," and described moments of stark awareness which he often got when his children laughed or displayed happiness. He mentioned that it made his heart soar, but also reminded him that time is finite, which is why he should be more present and enjoy every moment of it with the ones he loves. Ultimately, fatherhood became Frakes' greatest teacher. From Riker's bold command and grief-fueled advocacy to the quiet of family life, he learned that heroism often lies in simply showing up and staying. Legacy of love and loss. While Jonathan Frakes' journey has been marked by turbulent times and personal struggles, it also confirms the power of turning heartbreak into hope. After losing his brother Daniel and supporting Jeannie through her darkest hours, he emerged stronger, and his losses forged his story into a source of resilience. He transformed private grief into a public purpose and cause by not only becoming a force behind Star Trek, but also an advocate for cancer research and concerns. His life is now defined by his mentorship of young talents in the industry, strong advocacy, and his stardom. His marriage to Jeannie Francis, which spanned over 35 since their wedding in May 28, 1988, stands as a rare beacon of stability in Hollywood, particularly in an era of divorces and media scandals. They both opened up that their partnership thrived on mutual support and love, addiction recovery, career reinvention, and personal tragedy. Together, they crafted a legacy of resilience that has been enduring, adaptive, and authentically human. To many fans, Riker remains iconic. However, beyond the character, Frakes' true impact lies deeper. He's a mentor, guiding new Star Trek creatives like Ethan Peck and Michelle Paradise, as well as an advocate who has been fronting the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network's fundraising efforts. To top it all, he's a survivor who embodies emotional authenticity both on and off screen. As one fan noted, he helps actors make strong, deep, meaningful connections, and he is the best at it. In interviews, he reflected that sometimes the most heroic journeys happen off-screen. He's not just talking about battles with cancer, addiction, or grief. He's living that reality. His life demonstrates that heroism can be quiet, whether that involves standing by a partner, showing up for one's children, or using personal pain to fuel positive change. Ultimately, he has left behind more than a beloved character. He left a model of love that was forged in adversity, and his legacy is a combination of starship commands, family bonds, vulnerable truths, and advocacy. He reminds us that true heroism is in weathering loss and emerging armed not with power, but with compassion and purpose. Behind the bravado of Commander Riker stood Jonathan Frakes, a man who faced loss, grief, and fear and chose to live with purpose. His journey reveals not only heartbreak but remarkable endurance. He confronted family tragedy, addiction, and career setbacks, and learned to transform his pain into advocacy, mentoring, and quiet resilience. Jonathan's story shows that true heroism often lives off-screen, in the bonds we forge and the battles we choose. As Frakes himself said, "Believe in yourself and all that you are. Know that there is something inside you that is greater than any obstacle." Did you know about Jonathan Frakes' struggles before watching this? How has Star Trek impacted your life emotionally? What would you like to see Frakes direct next in the Star Trek universe? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Before you go, like and subscribe to our page and don't forget to click the next video below.